It's Fill Your Plate Now, where every bite brings you closer to the farm gate and further from what's unhealthy. Now here's your hosts, Julie and Tammy, helping you live well by filling your plate well.
I'm convinced there's a nutritionist for every walk of life now. But for our first responders, this is so important. There's the, blue line, and then there's the front line for our firefighters. And even in agriculture, we like to say we have the green line, or that,
The thin green line.
The thin green line, yes.
Yes, yes.
The thin blue line, the thin red line for our firefighters, and the thin green line for our Aggies. And so we're going to get to talk about our firefighters today, right?
Yes, and what this dietitian we're having on does to help keep them healthy. And I think, with a job like that, you have to stay alert and in really good shape and, hydrated. And although we're talking about firefighters, I think that also can apply to all of us in various aspects. There's times when we're under stress, or there's times when, maybe we're a little dehydrated, or we need a little bit more energy. So I think there's going to be a lot of application for our listeners as well, but it'll be interesting to hear more about, how the nutritional needs of the firefighters, our first-line responders.
Yeah. And
changes.
I have a nurse friend that she specializes in taking care of firefighters. So I'm absolutely going to promote this podcast to her because I think there will be a lot for her to get to hear from a nutritionist. So this is going to be great.
Yeah, I know. And today we have Megan Lautz on, and she's an award-winning dietitian, and she specializes in first responders. Megan creates realistic nutrition strategies that lead to improving their energy levels, better body composition, and helping them to reduce stress. Megan's worked full-time for departments of 1,600-plus firefighters since 2017, and she was the recipient of the ASPDA Trailblazer Award, recognizing her work advancing dietetics in public safety. Megan owns Rescue RD, LLC, which provides custom nutrition programs for departments nationwide. So, Megan, welcome. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about first responders.
Oh, great. Well, I'm just going to dive right in. I mean, you're a registered dietitian, you're a strength coach. But how did you first decide that working in this area of first responders was an area you'd be interested in, and how did the nutrition piece, come into play?
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't say, coming out of school, let's just work with first responders. I'm not married to a first responder. I have no first responders in my family. What ended up happening was I was working in corporate wellness. I got laid off and fell into this wellness program manager position for an occupational health clinic that served firefighters and police officers. And then when I started kind of digging into that job, I noticed there was no done for you nutrition advice specific to first responders. Tons of stuff for the 9 to 5, a little bit of research, but not something that's kind of chewed up and spit out for the firefighters to really be able to apply and run with it. So what I ended up doing was really focusing on the lifestyle, what the job needs, and then also how it impacts first responders' food choices. And then took the research and kind of turned textbook into actual real life for first responders. So that's what I've been doing for the past 9 years.
So cool. And because the first question that comes to mind to me on this is, what are their unique challenges, considering they typically have these very long shifts and they're obviously on the go. So what are unique challenges to them when it comes to nutrition?
Sure. So yes, longer shifts. So I work with both firefighters and police officers. You can also include dispatchers, and sometimes corrections also might fall in the first responder space. So these jobs typically could be somewhere between a 12 and 48-hour shift. And sometimes they are sleeping at the firehouse or on duty and that kind of stuff. The biggest changes is sleep deprivation, right? Because if they are sleeping at the station, they're getting up for calls, and that could be multiple calls a night that they're actually leaving the station and responding and have to be 110% ready to perform. We see high stress. Of course, these are very stressful jobs, especially when you're at busier stations. And then, of course, exposure to trauma. And I think the most overlooked piece is the exposure to trauma, because our first responders are exposed to hundreds of traumatic events over the course of their career. Relative to the general population, they may see maybe 3 in their lifetime, if that. And that impacts food choices as well.
That's fascinating. Well, for instance, the shifts. I mean, first responders, they're on duty 24/7 and often probably working night shifts, and such as nurses and a number of other professions. Any advice to our listeners or information on how you work with those night shifts and those change in sleep patterns versus what they need to eat? Anything you would recommend?
Sure. If you're doing like a 24, a day shift versus night shift, it really depends on the individual. But typically, I find that people maximize their energy levels with more regular meals. So they might be eating dinner at home with their family or just at home in general. And then their, second meal somewhere around midnight, a third meal somewhere around 4 a.m., and then maybe a snack before they go to bed when they get home. What I see is first responders or even nurses, people working night shifts, they really kind of struggle with, do I eat during the day with the normal people or do I eat like during my shift? And it can be very difficult to manage and you have to kind of personalize it to the individual. But typically trying to eat during the shift, they have better energy levels and they don't end up binging the next day or when they do get home from that shift, which can lead to like a roller coaster from a weight management perspective.
Oh, good point. Good point.
This kind of plays off of Tammy's questions, but on the broader scope of just their whole lifestyle, because it is unique. First responders, I mean, I'm even struck by your point about facing trauma. So what are the practical strategies across the board then with nutrition for them?
Yeah. So if you're talking from a health professional standpoint, like a health professional working with first responders, you have to lower the bar way more than you think. And when I say that is a lot of younger dietitians, they'll come out or people unfamiliar with the population think performance. They're thinking the shredded guys and girls who are holding the puppies for the calendars. And that's not quite always who we're working with. So typically much higher BMIs and also higher body fat percentages than a lot of people are aware of. So you need to have things that are portable, quick, and convenient when nutrition isn't the top frame of mind for someone who is trying to have a family life, a very busy career, picking up extra overtime, and then, like I said, some of the exposure to trauma piece. So the first thing I work with a lot of my clients for is packing a go bag. And regardless of if you're a first responder, someone working night shift, or if you're just, a mom who's taking their kid to soccer practice, you need a go bag. And a go bag is basically a snack bag full of non-perishable snacks that will keep your energy levels high, but also keep you from not eating everything that's not tied down when you get home from whatever thing you're doing. So in terms of what to pack in that, applesauce pouches, yes, the kind to give your toddlers. Those are great, non-perishable, full serving of fruit. You could do dried fruit, or that's It bars, Kind Press bars, Cliff bars, that's It bar, or excuse me, Fig bars, jerky, tuna packets, chicken packets, like tons and tons of snacks. Keep this in a small cooler or lunch bag in your car or in a backpack. And this can make a really big difference in your health goals, but also keeping you energized throughout the day.
Well, I'm going to call it the nutritious first responder pack.
Yeah, they don't like a whole lot of words.
That's true, too.
One of the things I love that you mentioned is the mom taking her child to soccer, because there are periods of time, whether it's kids that are going from school to sports practices or moms that are running carpools all over the place, where you don't always get to eat regular meals just because of the way things fall. So it seems like there's practical application across the board on that. We here in Arizona, I know that you're up in Baltimore, but we also have quite a bit of hot weather, and we're always talking about hydration and electrolytes. And I'd assume that, like with first responders, that can be an issue if they aren't properly hydrated or getting the electrolytes they need. How do you work with them in that respect?
Absolutely. And especially during the summer, our biggest thing, and for you all, it's a little bit it's not quite summer months. It's like almost early spring, or year round even. The electrolytes piece is key. And a lot of times dietitians coming out to first responders will say, oh, they need to lower their sodium. They need to lower their sodium. But when you're sweating through 3 undershirts, just in the first half of your day, you're losing quite a bit of sodium. So the biggest thing with first responders in hydration is we're trying to get to 92 to 125 ounces of fluid per day. That's the standard based off of the Institute of Medicine. It is pretty high, but again, that's a minimum number to start. And we also want to make sure that they have oral rehydration solution packets on hand. So ORS packets, are you guys familiar with those?
I am not.
No.
Oh, okay, great. Perfect.
Yeah, we're learning.
Now, I wouldn't say they are for my person working in an air-conditioned office, right? This is for someone who either is doing long workouts and sweating a ton, or they're doing some sort of active labor. So agriculture, farmers are probably in this category as well. Sometimes even surgeons and nurses, because the ORs can get a little hot and they're a long period of time. But oral rehydration solutions were developed for the cholera epidemic where they didn't have access to IV fluids in the quantities necessary to save people. So they developed something that could be administered orally and is equal to IV fluids in the case of mild to moderate dehydration. And we actually have studies that show that 9 out of 10 firefighters show up to planned, keyword planned, trainings and drills dehydrated. So these products are brands like Drip Drop ORS, Fluid Tactical, Liquid IV. And the key thing that I need people to know is that the sugar in these products actually has a purpose. So a lot of health conscious people are going for the sugar-free option because they think it's healthier. But what they don't realize is that in an oral rehydration solution, the sugar actually gives you an extra entry point on the cell to shuttle more water in. So you rehydrate 2 to 3 times as fast when you have sodium and sugar in these specific quantities in ORS packets than sports drink and sugar-free electrolyte products, which is something I have to debunk quite a bit.
Do you find those online? Do you usually have them order them online, or are they in the grocery store? Or
Yep,
okay.
most Liquid IV, I would say, Liquid IV is always at Costco, so that's where they tend to order them. The other brands, Amazon, that kind of thing. But of course, you can do your Gatorades, your Propels, but the sodium in Gatorade is going to be like 200 milligrams compared to 600 in these ORS products, which might sound super high. But firefighters are actually losing up to 40 ounces of sweat in 30 minutes of fire suppression related activity. So for context, remember the Stanley Cups?
Wow.
Yeah, one of these guys in 30 minutes. So, and if you look at how much sodium is in 32 ounces, so a liter of sweat, we're looking at 400 to 1800 milligrams of sodium. So they really need to be on replacement. The hard part is like, that's going to vary shift to shift. It's going to vary the time of year. So in the cooler, I know it's not technically super cool, but the cooler months for you guys, like they're not going to be losing as much sodium. So, they have to kind of play around and adjust as needed. But if you're, again, in that air conditioned office, you don't sweat a whole lot. You may not need these products on a regular basis.
That's really fascinating because I think any profession that you're outside in our climate could probably utilize something like that, as well as athletes that are working out in the heat.
And I love that Megan mentioned the farmers.
Yeah.
That they should have those packets handy to respond to the fact that they're going to be sweating a lot when they're out and about. And maybe you have addressed this already, but are there any other little notes as it relates to nutrition when it comes to stress or fatigue, or you spoke of that exposure to trauma? Does that bring in something else in your nutritional mix that you're trying to help our first responders with that we normally don't think about because we're not exposed to the things they're exposed to?
Sure. Well, so anybody, whether you're a first responder or just a general person who's been exposed to trauma, if you've ever done therapy to help work through some of the trauma that you've experienced, that is extremely draining. So I have a firefighter who I'm working with right now who's doing EMDR, and they have these little vibration pods, and the therapist is working through each traumatic event with him every single week. And he gets back from the session, and he feels like he's starting to process it. He's making progress, but he's zapped. like has to sit on the couch the rest of the evening, has no energy. And this can impact food in a couple different ways. It could impact it in, I'm not going to eat the rest of the day, my appetite's lower, or my appetite is revved, right? So I want the salty stuff, the sweet stuff, anything to kind of push down some of those emotions that a lot of our kind of gruff first responders, farmers, all of these people, don't really want to feel or process. So that's kind of how trauma can kind of impact first responders from a food perspective. If you think about coming back from a really bad call, say a really bad car accident where maybe not everybody survived, and I don't mean to be dark, but like imagine what do you want to eat after seeing something like that? No one really thinks about it. No one really unpacks that. So basically, my approach is number one, listening. Number two, making the assumption every single person in front of me has been exposed in one way, shape, or form. So I'm going to be paying attention for any binge eating, like loss of control with eating, struggling with food choices, and then determining if I need to work closer with a therapist for that specific individual. But if the individual can just work with me, then we are working on different strategies to help them be a little bit more mindful with food, but also understanding there are going to be days where they just have to say screw it, and that's fine.
You said in therapy and you used initials just for our audience so we make sure. I know it's trauma therapy, but what were the initials? What did they stand for?
Yes, so it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. It's a specific certification, I believe, and type of therapy that therapists can work whether it's a general person or a first responder through specific traumatic events.
And that's a lot of times somebody that has kind of a postpartum trauma response, right? Is that or
I believe so. I mean, I'm not the therapist.
I've heard about that, and I've heard that it's real effective, but I have also heard that the response afterwards is just really exhausting. It's almost like they have to recover from the therapy.
Correct.
Yes. In a good way. I'm sure in a good way. But
probably a mental exhaustion.
Yeah, right.
But and in terms of physical exhaustion, I would assume that many of these first responders have to use a lot of physical strength in various situations. How do you address muscle recovery or making sure they're getting enough protein?
Well, I don't know if you've ever worked with first responders. It's mostly men, and they love protein. So the problem is the protein sources that they are choosing are very high in fat, and there's usually no vegetables in sight. That's where we get into trouble. So it's less of typically, yes, I will give them protein numbers. So I go based off of the ISSN's numbers for athletes, which is somewhere between 0.7 to 1 gram per pound. And higher if you're trying to lose weight, on the lower end if you're trying to gain muscle or maintain muscle. But actually, the big thing that I'm trying to shove, no offense, down first responders' throats is vegetables, because that is the gap. And if you think about it, if your lunch was delayed for 3 hours because of calls or something like that, and you roll up to the Chick-fil-A parking lot, are you getting a salad? No one's getting a salad.
No.
We're getting the biggest milkshake, the biggest French fry, whatever's going to suffocate down that hanger and rage from not having lunch for 3 hours. So that we need to fill in the gaps, which is typically more fruit and vegetables.
Wow.
Got it.
What about supplements in general for our first responders or energy drinks or both of them? What do you counsel your first responders?
Sure.
You might have fun with this one, right?
Oh, yeah. They hate when I bring up caffeine because, they're insane. So I would be a really bad first responder dietitian if I told my, people working multiple calls after midnight, 24, 48-hour shifts to cut out caffeine entirely, right? So I go based off of the FDA recommendation, which is under 400 milligrams of caffeine per day. So in coffee, that is 30 to 40 ounces of coffee total in a day, which you might be thinking, wow, that's a super high, reasonable number. You get to sleep at night. The guys running 4 to 5 calls after midnight tell me those are rookie numbers, okay? Like these guys are not counting their caffeine in milligrams. They're counting their caffeine in grams. And that's a problem. Mm-hmm. So I have seen 1,000 milligrams, 1,200 milligrams, 2,000 milligrams of caffeine intake, in a day with some of my firefighters. They're not using it as a, performance tool. they're using it as like a lifeline. So a lot of times we pay more attention to pulling that number down a bit. We don't eliminate caffeine, but we might go from a Bang, which is 300 milligrams of caffeine in an energy drink, to a Monster, which is 150 milligrams of caffeine. So I'm at the sad point in my career where I'm recommending Monsters and Red Bulls because they're a little bit more reasonable from a caffeine perspective. But if you think about it, if I have someone drinking 3 Bangs a day and I get them to 3 Monsters, I've cut their caffeine in half. So they still have the behavior, but it's working them in the right direction. If I can have them stop caffeine 4 to 5 hours prior to bedtime, their sleep quality improves. And then they think I did witchcraft because they're drinking less caffeine and they have more energy.
Oh, man.
That's great. That's a great testimonial.
Yeah. So insightful.
And just like the general population, I'm sure from time to time there are health conditions you have to deal with first responders, whether it be metabolic or heart disease. How do you deal with some of the long-term health issues that you run across?
So first responders experience similar health consequences to the general population at much earlier points in their lives. So heart disease, cancer, and mental health conditions are at the top of those lists, and including non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is also up there, and metabolic syndrome. So actually 45% of line of duty deaths for firefighters actually are due to a sudden cardiac event. So it's not from them getting crushed by a beam falling or hit by a car or a burn that ends up killing our first responders. It's actually a heart attack, a fatal arrhythmia on the fire ground. So hydration plays a role in that, but also there's a lot of preventative factors we have to focus on to help make sure our firefighters are in the shape that they need to be in order to fight fire. But yes, we see heart issues, also cancer. So also think about all of the exposures that our firefighters have to carcinogenic materials. Their gear actually is very high in PFAS straight out of the factory. So we see, heart disease, cancer in their 40s, 50s, 30s sometimes. And yes, diet plays a role, but there are other things that we have to focus on too, trying to manage their sleep, reducing exposures at work to certain things. There are policies that departments can put into place and that kind of stuff. But typically, the nutrition, the thing we address from a nutrition perspective is, can I get more fruits and vegetables into their diet? Because fiber and antioxidants will help reduce the risk for heart issues, cancer issues, et cetera, et cetera.
And I would assume some of that heart disease-related ailments might be related to stress, too. Is there anything that you do in particular to help relieve the stress, besides cut back their caffeine, which I'm sure they're not happy about?
I like to think that from a stress standpoint. So my first responders come to me very stressed out about nutrition, because I don't know if you've been on TikTok or Instagram, but it's a hot freaking mess over there. One day eggs are bad, and then the next day eggs are good. And then one day they're supposed to do electrolytes with sugar, and the next day I'm telling them that they should. And it feels like that information changes day to day. And also that information is typically not made for them. It's made for the person who's going to bed every night, having dinner with their family, aren't in these really intermittently high stress jobs. So I like to think that when I can give them nutrition specific to their job that's portable, quick, and convenient, their stress levels are lower, right? They feel like they're actually making progress and achieving things compared to trying to do it on their own. But the stress management piece, it really depends on the individual. I really do push therapy and try and push them towards that. A lot of times I'm also pushing them towards sleep studies. We find that I believe close to 40% of firefighters have a sleep disorder, and 80% of them don't know it. And this is happening in their 20s and 30s. So not in their 40s, not in their 50s. So a lot of times getting that sleep assessed is also something we're talking about.
I have always had a love for our first responders, but Megan, you're giving me much more of an appreciation for everything they face besides what we know they typically face. And so one of your roles is as much just the educator as the nutritionist. You're certainly, as a nutritionist, trying to educate them, but you're talking about first responders that have very little time, or frankly, and I'm sure they're honest with you, they just might not be that interested. So what's your strategy for trying to get them to hear you or to educate them?
If I'm being blunt, cursing and sarcasm, like I'm pretty buttoned up right now, but I have to read the room. And food bribery. So, a lot of times they have these, kale pushing vegan runner dietitians come out to their station and they just miss the vibe. So the biggest thing is being able to speak in their language, which includes cursing and sarcasm, and then bringing snacks. So one of the biggest things I do when I come to stations is I bring something called the Reese's smoothie, which usually gets them just in the name. And the smoothie has chocolate protein powder, milk, peanut butter, and I'm missing something here, and spinach. So the thing that they don't like is the spinach, right? But the rule is they're going to try it and they're going to like it and they can talk crap when I leave. And then they usually try it, they like it, and then they start doing it the next day. So going to the stations, of course, invited, where, they're in their comfort zone, and you're bringing them a snack, and B, breaking nutrition down in a way that really makes sense for them, giving them go bag ideas, giving them stuff that's really quick and easy to start seeing progress. And then you have them. So it's a lot of time, a lot of experience to get to this point, but you can crack them if you know what you're doing.
And I know that a lot of the stations, they all kind of rotate in terms of cooking. So my question then, an add-on question is, once you get done kind of giving them insights on how easy it is actually to apply nutritional strategies to their eating, do they ever change the way they cook at the station? Because I know a lot of them still do that, correct?
Yes. So if you have a shift who's working typically a 24-hour shift or longer, they will all put X amount of dollars into basically a hat, and they will buy dinner. So it used to be $5 to $6 a head. In this economy, that's not really happening. It's now like $8 to $10 out of their own pocket, not from the county. And then they'll go to the grocery store on that shift at some point, pick up what they need for dinner, and then they'll cook at dinner. Some shifts will have one person who just likes cooking and they do the cooking. Sometimes they rotate it. The truck cooks one night, the engine cooks one night, et cetera, et cetera. I will say they are starting to get a lot better. Like 20 years ago, if you tried to get them off of like $2 meals that were just like spaghetti and ragu, I think they'd come at you with pitchforks. Now they're a lot more open to it. And I actually have a free recipe book on my website, rescuerd.com. And it's $5 to $6 a head. It's broken out for shifts of 6 people, 10 people, and 14 people, half a pound of protein per person. So it takes what standards they typically do and literally does the math for them. So if they're at a bigger station, they know how much to cook. If they're at a slower station or, a smaller station, they know how much to cook and that kind of thing.
And so practical application, your website. Awesome.
That's what I was just thinking too. That practical application is so important because if they hear it and they don't have the recipes or ideas to fulfill it, it makes it much harder. That's a great idea. You have so many interesting things you work with first responders. Do you have an example of maybe one instance that stands out where you were able to really help someone through their diet, changing their diet or instructing them on what they should eat?
Sure, absolutely. Well, and I think everybody wants me to tell like I've helped someone lose 100 pounds story, right? Like they want that flagship story. And yes, I have. But I think my most impactful stories are the ones where I have a really busy parent, right? A female or male who, they're working full time. They've got multiple kids. They're running side jobs or overtime. And we just worked on some small tips, whether it was better fast food choices, packing the go bag, maybe trying some logging. If that doesn't work, we just try basic portion control and really tailoring it to the individual. And they lose 20 pounds without changing their whole life. Because how many times have you seen people, oh, I'm going to get on this diet in January. Like, let's do carnivore. Let's do, I don't know, paleo and all these different types of diets. But then they fall flat on their face when they try to go back out of that diet. And we were able to get people to see weight loss without changing their whole life. They can still have a cupcake at their kid's birthday party. They can still have a beer at their captain's retirement. It's really lifestyle-driven nutrition. And I think, when we talk about specialties, the details really matter. If you can really teach someone how to eat better and it's easy for them and it really makes sense in their lifestyle, they're a lot more open to making some of those changes.
You know, we might have some first responders that listen to this podcast, and I certainly will have my nurse friend who specializes taking care of first responders. What are some of the practical application then for some of our listeners? You made inference to all of that throughout this whole show, but what are some other practical tips?
Sure. So my other practical tip after the go bag is what I like to call struggle meals. And struggle meals are meals when you are struggling, which for most of us, when you have kids, that's exactly what you have to eat, right? I can tell from experience. And struggle meals are fast food or frozen food. So a lot of people be like, well, why are you telling people to eat fast food and frozen food, Megan? That's not the healthiest, perfectest option. Well, no one's going for the healthiest, perfectest option right now anyway. And if you feel like you have no time, you have no energy, you're processing trauma, you're processing stress, you're taking care of everybody but yourself, you don't have time for Whole Foods, 4-hour meal preps every week. You don't have time for that. So we have to be realistic. Where are you at? So you're probably at frozen food and fast food. So for freezer meals, yes, they're higher in sodium. But whatever you were going to order from Grubhub when you got back from your shift, or if you were going to swing by McDonald's, it's going to be higher in sodium than whatever that option is. So for freezer meals, Healthy Choice has some decent ones. They now have something called Power Bowls, which are 35 grams of protein, so pretty decent for protein. Having a couple of those on hand. Costco has these Bare Nuggets, BARE. They're just like breaded chicken nuggets, not fried. Sweet potato fries, like just a couple different things in the freezer that are quick and easy. And you can heat them up in the microwave and then you have a meal, and it can really save it. It's a better bad decision, as our strength coach in Fairfax likes to say. It's not perfect. It's in the right direction. And same thing with fast food. For fast food, 80% of the time, if you can get a leaner protein, so grilled chicken, grilled steak, grilled fish, grilled pork, and then a fruit or a vegetable, you're doing great. Now, of course, sometimes you're going to want the French fries. Get the French fries. I'm fine with that. I just want you to think, if you're really striving to make certain health goals, you're going to have to make decisions that you don't want to make when you have to make them, which means sometimes you have to get a fruit cup, and you didn't want the fruit cup. But having some healthier frozen meals and fast food, that way, even if you are planning on eating really perfect meals, or you're going to be doing the meal prep and the meal prep falls through, guess what? You've got backups.
I love that. And then just out of curiosity, the chief reaches out to you and then he sets it up and then you talk to the whole station. What about, are you also consulting individually with different first responders?
That's more like a chief. Sometimes it's a wellness, there's a captain in the role. It's not usually the fire chief. There are chiefs under the fire chief, which most civilians don't know. But it's usually fire, police, dispatch, public safety departments, and occasionally a hospital center will reach out as well. And I provide presentations. I'll come out in person. I fly everywhere.
And you probably, it may be a handful of first responders all the way. What's the largest crowd you've ever had? I'm just curious.
Oh, God. I think 300 or 500. It's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, I know a lot of conferences.
Amazing.
Well, a lot of practical information, though, that you could apply in your everyday life as well as with first responders, And if you had to boil it all down for our listeners, 3 key things you'd want them to take away from this today, what would those be?
Sure. So summarizing the better bad decisions, right? So your struggle meals, fast food, frozen, and your go bag. So regardless if you're a first responder or not, get some better options for those 3 things so that you have a backup when you don't get to the meal prep.
I think that is such practical advice for everyone. And I know so much of our calories, so many of our calories too, is in snacks. So if you have a go bag, at least you know you're getting things that have somewhat planned for healthy options.
And Megan, share your website one more time, because this has been so fascinating, and I'm so glad that there's someone like you taking care of our first responders in a very, very important way.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm spoiled to work with them. I'm never bored. So rescuerd.com is my website, and then I'm on Instagram and TikTok at rescue.rd.
So you're one of those TikTok people, huh?
Well, I'm more of an Instagram, and then I repost to the TikToks. You know, I'm a millennial, right? The Gen Z's got the TikTok down a little bit better than I can.
Well, this has been fantastic. We really appreciate you being with us today. You did a fantastic job. It was really interesting, and would love to have you back sometime again. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you for having me.